Welcome to the Midnight Mind. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here and give the video a like while you're at it. It really helps the channel. It's midnight, and that means one thing. It's time to enter the mind of Machiavelli. Have you ever noticed that we're always living through a crisis? An economic crisis, a pandemic, a war, real or threatened, a credit crunch, a housing shortage, a climate emergency, a cost of living crisis. You turn on the TV and it's the same story with a different label. A new emergency, a new reason why you must hold on, tighten your belt, make sacrifices, and above all, trust the state. Because without them, where would we be? You feel it in your bones, don't you? That subtle sense that the world is always hanging by a thread. That your safety, your livelihood, your very survival depends on someone else managing the storm. This is not just politics, it's psychology. Because when you're told that disaster looms, your mind becomes primed for dependency. You stop asking who caused the storm, and instead, you clutch to whoever promises a raft. Now here's the truth. This dynamic is not new. It was written centuries ago by Niccolò Machiavelli, in one of the most brutal yet honest books ever produced, The Prince. In his chapter on civil princedom, Machiavelli makes a chilling observation. He writes that a ruler cannot trust the loyalty of the people in times of peace and plenty. When things are going well, citizens grow bold. They ask questions, they push back, they forget they need him at all. But in moments of crisis, when fear grips their hearts, suddenly they remember their dependency, and in that fear, loyalty returns. Think about that. Comfort breeds complacency, even disobedience. But necessity breeds loyalty. This is Machiavelli's law. He described how a wise ruler, if he wants to survive, must ensure that the people always feel the need of him. It's not enough to govern during prosperity, you must be indispensable when the world shakes. You must be the anchor when chaos arrives. Machiavelli doesn't say this with pity or regret, he says it with calculation. He knew what human beings are: forgetful, self-interested, and above all, afraid of losing what little they have. Now think about your own life. How many times have you bent the knee to necessity? How often have you endured mistreatment at a job because you feared unemployment? How often have you stayed silent in front of authority because you feared losing status, money, or safety? In times of calm, you imagine yourself strong. But when the storm arrives, you reach for shelter, and whoever controls the shelter controls you. But here's the revelation. Rulers have always known this. Fear and necessity are not accidents of politics. They're tools. They're cultivated, managed, and when useful, prolonged. Consider this image. A shepherd has two ways of keeping his flock in line. He can build fences, or he can release the wolf. The fence is costly, obvious, and resented. But the wolf makes the sheep run toward the shepherd on their own. Machiavelli's genius was to recognize that rulers need not always build fences. They only need to let people believe that the wolf is never far away. Now, pause and ask yourself, when was the last time you truly felt free of crisis? When was the last time you believed the world was stable, safe, and secure? Perhaps never, because the wolf has been with you since birth. The labels change: war, depression, pandemic, shortage, but the pattern does not. And every time you tighten your belt, you make sacrifices, you accept restrictions, and you whisper to yourself, at least they're keeping me safe. Machiavelli would laugh, not cruelly. He would say, you're simply human. You can't help it. For man, he writes, is ungrateful, fickle, and cowardly in danger. It's precisely because you are this way that rulers rule. They don't rely on your love, they rely on your fear. Now imagine a ruler sitting at his desk centuries ago, or today. He knows that peace makes you restless, prosperity makes you bold. He knows you will turn on him the moment you no longer feel the need of him. So what does he do? He ensures you are never without a sense of danger. Not enough to destroy you, just enough to remind you that without him, you would be lost. And here's where the Machiavellian principle becomes timeless. Comfort doesn't produce loyalty. Crisis does. That's why every age, every regime, every government learns to clothe itself in necessity. They don't merely want your consent, they want your dependency. You can already see the outlines of this in your own life. The endless emergencies, the constant stream of reasons why this is not the time to question, not the time to resist, not the time to rebel. There is always a greater danger, always a necessary sacrifice. Always a reminder that survival comes first, freedom second. But Machiavelli would whisper, that is the point. For the wise ruler, crisis is not an accident. It's the stage on which power is renewed. Now think about this. Not every crisis is invented out of thin air. Some are real, some are devastating. But power doesn't waste them. You've heard the phrase, never waste a good crisis. That's not just a clever line, it's the blueprint of governance. Because when disaster strikes, when fear spreads, when survival feels at stake, people are willing to accept what they would normally resist. They sign away freedoms, they endure new taxes, they surrender privacy. Why? Because crisis makes obedience feel like common sense. History shows this pattern again and again. Take the Cold War. For decades, the United States and the Soviet Union glared at each other across the oceans of ideology. Each one presented the other as a mortal threat. And so long as the enemy existed, there was justification. Justification for vast military budgets, justification for surveillance, justification for loyalty. Alan Watts once pointed out the irony. The USA and the USSR needed each other. Without the enemy, the entire structure of defense, spending, and fear would collapse. It was a dance of necessity. Two giants locked in opposition, but also locked in mutual survival. Ask yourself, who benefited most from this arrangement? Ordinary citizens forced to live under the constant shadow of nuclear war, or the vast military-industrial complexes that thrived on perpetual tension? Watts was right. The two superpowers were enemies, but also partners. Each one gave the other its reason for existence. Without the Soviet threat, how would Americans have accepted endless military spending? Without the American menace, how would Soviets have justified their iron grip? But here's the truth. This isn't unique to the Cold War. It's the oldest trick in politics. Find or create an enemy. Magnify its danger. Then present yourself as the shield. The people will pay, obey, and even cheer the very chains that bind them, so long as they believe those chains keep the wolf at bay. Now, look at your own life. After the Cold War ended, did you feel relief? Did you feel that the world had finally grown safer? Perhaps for a fleeting moment. But then new enemies, new threats, new crisis arrives. Terrorism became the new spectre. Then financial collapse. Then pandemics. Then the drumbeat of forever wars in distant lands. Each one presented as the ultimate emergency. Each one demanding sacrifices of your freedom, your money, your peace of mind. But here's the revelation. When power discovers how effective crisis is, it cannot afford to let crisis end. Problems must be solved just enough to keep society functioning, but never solved so fully that fear disappears. If one crisis fades, another must rise to take its place. Like a stage play, the props may change, but the script remains the same. The people must feel that without the state, without authority, without rulers, they would be devoured by chaos. Now, think about your own obedience in these terms. When you stood in long lines at airports after new security laws, when you accepted financial austerity after a credit collapse, when you submitted to lockdowns, restrictions, and surveillance during a pandemic, did you believe these measures would be temporary? Did you hope that once the crisis passed, the chains would loosen? But look closely. How many of those measures have remained? How often does the state give back what it has taken in crisis? Rarely. Almost never. Because crisis opens the door, and once opened, it's difficult to close. This is why the phrase "never waste a good crisis" is not cynical, it is accurate. Leaders know the moments of collective fear are the greatest opportunities. In most moments, they can push through policies that would be unthinkable in times of calm. You've felt it yourself. When panic rises, you don't question as deeply. You don't resist as fiercely. You want stability, even at the cost of freedom. Machiavelli would nod approvingly, because his insight was simple. Necessity binds, comfort unravels. In peace, people turn inward, grow bold, forget their dependency. In crisis, they cling to the ruler, even if he is cruel. The rulers, whether kings, presidents, or bureaucrats, have learned this lesson too well. Now, let me ask you directly, how many times have you given away something of yourself in a crisis? How many times have you accepted rules, limits, humiliations that you would never tolerate in ordinary life? Did you over-explain yourself at work, fearing you'd lose your position in unstable times? Did you stay silent about your opinions, afraid that voicing them would cost you friendships or security? Did you say yes when you were exhausted, because you believed the moment demanded sacrifice? Each of these is a micro-crisis, and in each, you surrendered power. But here's the dangerous truth. If individuals do this, entire nations do it too. Populations, in fear, surrender their will. They march in lockstep, they tolerate indignities, they become pliable. And those who rule them, whoever they may be, understand that the longer this fear lasts, the stronger their grip becomes. Now imagine crisis not as an occasional storm, but as a carefully managed climate. Imagine leaders realizing that they need not solve a crisis fully, that they can simply manage them, extend them, even replace them with new ones when the old ones fade. What you get is not a cycle of peace and danger, but an endless loop, a perpetual crisis. This is where history leads us. From Cold War enemies to modern terror, from financial collapse to global health emergencies, the pattern is unmistakable. Rulers may not always create the crisis, but they will always amplify it, frame it, and use it. And as long as you feel you cannot survive without them, their survival is guaranteed. Now pause for a moment and look at your daily reality. You wake up, check your phone, and before your first sip of coffee, the crisis is already waiting. A collapsing market, a brewing war, a looming shortage. The headlines blare: emergency, urgency, catastrophe. Even if nothing touches your life directly, the feeling burrows in. You're never at ease, never safe, never free of the threat. You are living in the era of perpetual crisis. This is not coincidence, it's structure. The 24-hour news cycle thrives on your fear, because fear glues your eyes to the screen. The networks discovered long ago that calm doesn't sell. All is well doesn't keep you watching. But disaster, danger, outrage, these are profitable. So the fire hose never stops. Every storm is the storm of the century. Every election is the most important of your lifetime. Every headline screams that this moment is decisive. You're conditioned to live as if history itself is always at the brink. Now think about the effect this has on your psychology. When you live in constant crisis, your nervous system adapts to survival mode. You grow less willing to rebel, less willing to question, less willing to take risks. Because survival mode narrows the mind. You want safety, not freedom. Order, not certainty. Rulers know this. They don't need to crush you with violence if they can saturate you with fear. Fear is cheaper, subtler, and more reliable. But here's the truth. Fear isn't only profitable to media, it's indispensable to power. Populations steeped in crisis are easier to govern. They will accept restrictions, surveillance, austerity, even humiliation, so long as they believe these things will shield them from chaos. You see this in every part of your life. You tolerate disrespect from superiors because you fear unemployment. You hide your true opinions because you fear rejection. You exhaust yourself saying yes to obligations because you fear what will happen if you say no. At every level, crisis manufactures obedience. Now, look back at Machiavelli. In The Prince, he never spoke of 24-hour news channels or social media feeds, but he understood the principle. A wise ruler must ensure that people always feel the need of him. The more chaotic the world appears, the more indispensable he becomes. What Machiavelli hinted at, today's media system has perfected. It doesn't simply report crisis, it multiplies it, magnifies it, embeds it into your daily rhythm. So you don't merely witness crisis, you inhabit it. But here's the revelation. Perpetual crisis is not just about control. It's about exhaustion. You've felt this exhaustion yourself. The fatigue of scrolling through endless emergencies. The numbness that follows when everything is urgent. At first, you panic. Then you burn out. And in that burnout, you become passive. You stop resisting. Not because you believe, but because you're too tired to fight. Power doesn't need your loyalty. It only needs your surrender. Now think about your own patterns. How many times have you accepted the narrative simply because you were too drained to investigate? How many times have you nodded along with the official story because the alternative felt overwhelming? How often have you told yourself, "I'll just go along, it's easier"? This is how perpetual crisis erodes freedom. Not in a single stroke, but drip by drip, until questioning feels like too much effort. And here's the danger. When fear becomes the background noise of life, you no longer recognize it as fear. It feels normal. You confuse dependency for safety. You mistake exhaustion for peace. But the state, the institutions, the rulers, whether consciously or not, have achieved their goal. You no longer imagine a life without them. You believe their presence is the only thing holding back the tide. Now reflect. When was the last time you experienced a collective sense of security? A moment when society at large felt free of existential danger? Decades ago? Perhaps never. Because each generation has been raised under the shadow of one crisis or another. And this is no accident. It is continuity. Machiavelli's principle, born in modern form, amplifies through mass media and technology until it surrounds you day and night. But here's the unsettling truth. Perpetual crisis isn't just a story told to you. It's a cage that you help maintain. You share the headlines. You repeat the warnings. You live in constant vigilance, transmitting the fear to others. You become both prisoner and guard. And because everyone around you does the same, the atmosphere of fear feels inescapable. You don't even notice the bars anymore. Now look again at the structure. Crisis comes in waves. Economic collapse, housing shortages, pandemics, foreign wars. But they never resolve. Each one bleeds into the next. Solutions are promised, but rarely delivered. Instead, you're told to prepare for the next emergency. And through it all, the refrain remains. Trust us, obey us, sacrifice for us, because without us, you will not survive. This is the essence of the era of perpetual crisis. It's not that emergencies are fabricated wholesale. Some are real, devastating and urgent. But once they arrive, they're managed not toward resolution, but toward preservation. Preservation of power. Machiavelli's principle echoes across centuries. Comfort makes you restless. Necessity makes you loyal. And so necessity must never end. So the question is not whether you live in crisis, you do. The question is whether you can see it for what it is. A system, a strategy, a way of governing that thrives not on peace, but on endless turbulence. For as long as you believe survival depends on obedience, those who rule you will never lack for power. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button for me. I really would appreciate it. And if you have any thoughts on today's episode, I'd love to hear them. Leave me a message down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.